Hi guys, Daryl Smith from South Dakota again. We paused. We were exhausted. You could see the prayer flags flying only about a quarter mile away, marking the Thorong Pass. Glenda looked toward the flags and looked back toward me and kind of had a questioning look in her eyes and said, "I don't think I can make it." We were on Thorong on a trek in Nepal. And today, I'm going to try to tell that story, maybe longer, one of our longer stories, because it goes on for a while. Hope I don't bore you too much. It all started in Honolulu. We were based in Honolulu, and I interacted with a lot of the people there. And one of the girls that worked in operation in the office, I overheard her talking about going on a trek in Nepal. And I listened for a little bit and discovered that this would be her fifth trek in that country. The high Himalayas was a draw to her, and she kept going back. Well, I quizzed her about it a little bit and asked tell me about it. And the more I heard, the more I knew, or thought I knew, that it would be that Glenda and I needed that to complete our life. So I went home and I talked to Glenda about it, and she was not enthusiastic at all. We had done a lot of hiking, but not anything serious. So anyway, I talked her into giving it a try, and she reluctantly said, "Well, let's do it." We contacted the people. I believe it was Pat and I can't think of his name right now. Harrington, and they lived in Seattle, and they were kind of heading up this group that were going to go for a trek. Well, they said they didn't have room for us. They were all booked up. Well, I wrote them a whiny letter saying I really needed to go and I wanted to go, and I guess they just got tired of hearing a grown man grovel, and they said, "Okay, we'll make room for you." So we were in. Glenda bought a new pair of boots. She thought they didn't fit exactly right, and she wore them. She took them to the boot shop, and they tried to stretch them, and she was still worried that they weren't going to be good enough for that trip. Years after that, we took a trek in the desert in Arizona, and she wore those very same boots, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're not around the house here somewhere. They were a good pair of boots, and they served her well. Well, we did some training there in Honolulu, and we walked up and down the hills and tried to do it on a regular basis. But there was, and our bodies got stronger. There's no doubt about that. But there was one catch. We were doing training at sea level, and we would be tested at nearly 18,000 feet in the Himalayas. So that was a little bit of a problem. So the big day came, and we were working with Northwest Airlines. We couldn't do it if it wasn't for working for an airline. We were able to get travel at a very reasonable rate. So we boarded a jet in Honolulu, which took us to Tokyo, Japan, and from there we got on another plane and flew into Bangkok. Both flights were uneventful. I think, if I remember correctly, we were lucky enough on standby. You take what you can get, but I think we were lucky enough to get first class seating, so it was a good ride. Uneventful, except on the ride from Tokyo to Bangkok, we were able to see a meteor, not a meteor. I can't think of the word again. But we did see the big mountain that we didn't think we'd see before. Comet. we saw a comet across the sky, and it was quite a sighting. It's the best one I've ever seen. Well, we got in Bangkok, and we had 2 or 3 things to do there. One, we had to book passage on Thai Airlines into Kathmandu. So we spent about 3 days learning the city and exploring the city, eating great food. Thai food is just, we thought it was excellent. And then we flew into Kathmandu. Kathmandu is a busy city, and the immigration process was a little trying. We had people that we were standing in line, but just regular passengers would just walk right past us to the front of the line and elbow their way in and get into the country. We thought it was pretty rude. And once we walked outside the terminal, we were met by Pat, and I still can't remember his name, and Purba. Purba was our head leader, Sherpa, for the trip. And he had his wife along and their youngest child. She was holding the youngest child. And they had flower lays for us, and they taught us the meaning of the word namaste. Namaste is said, it's kind of a greeting. It's said by praying hands and a slight bow. And the meaning of it is, I bow to you, I respect you. And so that was kind of fun to learn that. So we were packed into a small van and headed to our hotel. And we had a delay in that there were some sacred cows that had chosen to take a nap on a bridge. And cows can do anything they want to do, and nobody bothers them at all. So it was just a traffic jam until we could go by one at a time. It closed off one lane completely. But the cows would walk right downtown and poop on the sidewalks. It was okay. They didn't mind that. Anyway, we had a flat tire also on the way to the hotel, so it was eventful already. The hotel itself was a 4-story structure, and it was basic. The rooms were such that like the bathroom, when you took a shower in the bathroom, it was a wet room, they called it, so that everything in the bathroom got wet. The floors, the walls, the commode, everything would get wet while you were taking the shower. And the bed was far from comfortable. We did have the hotel had a little patio outside with tables and in the shade tree, and it was warm. So we could sit out there and drink a beer if you wanted to and relax. It was fun. Well, we got to travel around Kathmandu. It's a busy city. A lot going on. We saw snake charmers. We saw monkeys running free. People were processing wool along the riverbank, just had the wool stretched out and laying out all over the riverbank, I guess after they washed it, drying it. I'm not sure. But we saw a trekker. He obviously was not from Nepal. He lost control of his bowels. He saw him, he stepped behind the building down below. We were kind of on the hill and we had full view of him. Well, we saw one thing I'll never forget. We saw a cremation. Down by the river, there were little platforms, and stacked over to one side were big stacks of straw and wood, dried wood. So they would put the body, build a kind of a platform on top of a concrete platform and lay the body on that, and then include straw in there that made it burn fast and hot, and they would light it up. Once the process was gone to a certain level, they had brushes and they just brushed whatever was left into the river, and the river would take care of it. So we saw one in process, and just as we were about to leave, a bunch of young men came down the stairway, and they had a dead body held up above on their shoulders, and they were headed to the river to take care of the process down by the river. Well, it took us about 3 or 4 days in Kathmandu to get the permits and to get everything together so that we could start our trek. Somebody suggested that we rent a coat for the upper levels of the Himalaya mountains. They said it's going to be cold up there. So we went to a shop that was in that sort of business, and they fixed us up with real heavy, fluffy, thick, I don't know if they were down or what they were, but they were lightweight, but they definitely, we got them up on the hill and they were of good use. Well, finally, after all the permits and this was set up, we gathered and climbed into an old school bus type bus, and everything, and all the gear, all the tents, all the Sherpas, and also the cooking fuel. Cooking fuel was put inside the bus, and the containers evidently had a leak or something because it was awful, the fumes. But hour after hour we rode in those fumes. Approximately halfway to our jumping off point, we had some sort of a tire problem on the bus, and we stopped in a little village, and for about an hour we were just turned loose so we could wander through the village while they tried to get the tire fixed. I don't know if they ever fix it, maybe not. But anyway, we continued on. There's a little stream running right through the middle of town, and people were washing and looked like collecting water from the stream for cooking or whatever. Well, just wandering around, we walked upstream, and it was very obvious that animal and maybe even human waste could have easily contaminated that stream. And the lack of sanitary conditions, I think, probably caught up with all of us. We had some problems with that before it was over. Well, after pounding along in the heat and in the fumes, we finally came to the end of the road. The road just didn't go any farther than that. And it was in a little town. I kind of jokingly, I couldn't spell it or pronounce it properly, but the way they said it, it sounded like body odor, the word body odor, or the words body odor. Well, we didn't know what we were doing and didn't know what to expect. So we just stood around and watched, and all the help pulled all the tents out and put them in a dried rice paddy. It was dry and dusty and flat, though, by the way. And we set them up, and we spent mostly sleepless nights, it seemed, in the rice paddy. The next morning, we saw a really strange happening, to us anyway. Purba, our head Sherpa, was out in the edge of the rice paddy, a few feet away from the tents we were, and gathered in front of him, all of them squatting, were men, boys, and even a few women. And what was happening was Purba, our Sherpa, was negotiating with them. He needed porters, and porters were people that carried the load up that hill, up those mountains, on their back. That's the only way for things to get there. They did have donkeys that transported some. So anyway, they negotiated for an hour or so, and it ended up that we started trekking, left on our trek, walking with quite a number of these young people. It was I say young people, it was a variety of people. There was old people and young people. And there was a couple of girls, but one girl ended up, we called her the egg lady. She had a square pack on her back, and she carried enough fresh eggs for us to have eggs to eat every morning for breakfast for the entire trip. And we were going to be out for about 15 days. So anyway, that's the way we started trekking down the path, and it's called the Annapurna Circuit, which is a big circle. Not, it wouldn't be a circle, a big out and back or out and around, where you go up and over Thorong Pass, which is about almost 18,000 feet, 17,700 and something, if I remember correctly. Well, we'd find a place to sleep for the night. The Sherpas, I guess, knew where they were going to camp out, but we did camp out. Early in the morning, every morning, there was a quiet voice that right at the flap of our tent says, "Morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. Bed tea." And we'd open the curtain, and he would have a little tray with hot tea and cream and sugar, and we would make ourselves some warm tea, and that would be the start of our day. Breakfast was served right away. They always served a big breakfast, and they had tables. Then they carried those tables up through the mountains there, tables and folding chairs, and they were big enough for, I think, let's see, I hadn't thought about this for a while. I think there may be as many as 15 people or more, the truckers. And the table or tables were set up so that it would look like one big table, and we would all sit around that table and for our meals. As soon as we got through, I could back up just a minute. Before we came out of our tent, we would pack up our stuff for the road, and we would, some of the people coined the term shoveling shit. And so we would shovel everything that we had, sleeping clothes, extra clothes, whatever, into our bags and open the tent and shove it out the tent. And sitting there, squatting with a piece of cotton rope would be our porter. And as soon as we got out, he would start maneuvering with that rope and those bags, and as soon as he got it together, he would head on up the road ahead of us. So, and then as soon as we got out of the tents came down and were packed up and put on the guy's back, and they would proceed up the path. We'd have a nice breakfast and put on our hiking shoes, and there was no instruction. I guess you couldn't get lost, or just one trail, but we would head up the trail. It was mostly easy walking. There wasn't any climbing to it. We were going up a long stream valley until we got to the pass. So we would be trekking. Glenda and I took off. Would try to get an early start. We tried to get started early, do a slow, steady pace, and by the time they caught us and passed us, then we kind of all arrived at the next spot at approximately the same time. Well, toward the noon hour, we started looking for the blue tarp, we called it. There was a big plastic tarp that came along, and the Sherpas would get out in front of us, spread that tarp out, and start working on lunch, cooking lunch, or fixing lunch. Mostly it was, we always had bread and maybe like cold cuts, cheese, and some sort of orange-like drink. So when we got to the lunch spot, we'd kick off our boots, throw our packs down, either sit or stretch out on that blue tarp, maybe even take a nap. An interesting thing at lunch or anytime we stopped, the local people would come and watch us. There'd be as many as 10 or 15 standing just off the blue tarp, just standing there quietly looking. They were just watching and looking at everything we did. Didn't say, they weren't talking, they just watch us. So anyway, one time for lunch, I was in the edge of a field and I looked down and we were about, half knee high of a field full of marijuana plants, young marijuana plants. I don't know if marijuana is legal there or what, but anyway, it was there. Again, there was no official, okay, everybody up, start walking. People would just put on their shoes, get on their pack, and ease away from lunch. And again, the Sherpas would be somewhere in some little town, and they would be standing in the middle of the trail and saying, "This is our place for the night." And they would, if the tents were already set up, you would just walk into the area and throw your bag down in front of any tent, any open tent, and that was your house for the night. If the tents had not arrived, then you just find a comfortable place to sit and to wait until it was ready for us. There was no refrigeration up there in the hills. At one point, I remember a Sherpa just in casual conversation saying that it was probably, we were probably 30 or 40 miles from the nearest wheel, any kind of wheeled vehicle. Everything was afoot. So anyway, we would arrive, Sherpa would guide us to where we were going to sleep, and supper would be set up pretty soon, and we would sit and nurse our blisters and get ready and have another night's sleep. So that was a typical day. We did that over and over again, and it was quite an adventure. We went to about 12,000 feet in order to take a day of rest and acclimation to get used to the altitude. We took a day off in Manang. Manang was the name of the city, and we had a full day off. And some of the women, I didn't see any men doing that, but some of the women washed clothes, and it was cold. I forgot to say that we woke up the next morning and there was about 3-inch snow weighing our tent down. The skies were blue and beautiful, but it was cold out. But even at that, the women tried to wash a few garments. During the day, Glenda and I took a small hike up the trail and back down again just to get a little exercise, loosen up our muscles. But during the day, across the valley, and we were on the side of a hill, and so you could look to the river below and then up the other side, and there were avalanches over there, several of them. You'd hear them, and you look over and you could see them slide. We were not in any danger whatsoever. It was a long, long ways away. So we, as I mentioned, that was a typical day. We got back on the trail again, and after 2 or 3 days, we got to Thorong Petty, and that's the foot of the Thorong La Pass. We had, it was cold, and those big coats that we talked about we rented came in really handy. Glenda and I zipped our sleeping bags together, took off all our clothes, and piled every other piece of clothes we had on top of our sleeping bags, including those big coats. and we slept touching each other all night, and we were still cold. We were still cold. So when we got up the next morning to make our press to the summit and over Thorong Pass, it was 3 degrees above zero, and that was pretty cold for us. So anyway, Glenda put on a lot of clothes because it was cold, and she didn't get 150 yards down the trail before she was overheated, and so we had to stop and redo her clothing to get her so that she was at the right could maintain the right temperature. Well, it was a long day, but the trail was not steep. It wasn't like you had to climb. It was a trail, but it was uphill all the way. And at times when we turned the corner, we could see where we were going, and it felt like forever going up there. So we ended up finally getting to the point where Glenda says, "I don't think I can make it." Well, I never told her this, but at the time she said that, I had exactly the same feeling. I didn't think I could make it. So we did get to the top, and there was a lot of chatter. People were standing around excited that they'd made it. There were prayer flags, strings of them hanging everywhere, marking the top. And it was definitely a pass. It was a notch in the mountains, and there was high mountains to the left and high mountains to the right. But we went over the pass, Thorong. So we didn't hang around up there very long. We immediately headed down the mountain, and almost immediately we were going from south to north. As we topped out and started down, the snow went away completely, and the temperature came up. And from that vantage point, we could look out across the Tibetan plateau and see it was lit from where our point of view. It looked just dry and brown as far as you could see. Anyway, we came down the hill and got to the city of Muktanah. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing these right, but that's what we always said. Muktanah was a busy little place. People were moving around, and we were set up in a little field with a stone wall around it that had dust. It seemed like 2 or 3 inches deep. And Glenda had been suffering from sinus problems for a day or so, and all of this dust triggered that completely. We walked around town a little bit, and I don't remember seeing one blade of grass. It was just dirt and dust and gravel. So anyway, that's where we spent our last night, and Glenda was miserable, and we decided that we had achieved our goal. We had gone over Thorong Pass, and that we would try to leave the trek at Johnson, which is the next town from Muktanah. So we had a long day's hike into Johnson, and it was big enough that it had a little airport. And we found that out, and we decided we would catch a flight from there to Pokhara, which is a nice sized town. So we found a hotel. We actually went out and into a restaurant and ate a steak, I think. And we got a hot shower and a good night's sleep. And the next morning, the hotel owner he volunteered, insisted on being our porter. So he shouldered our bags and walked us half mile or so to the airport. And we, I can't remember the details now, how we got tickets. But we stood around and waited, and all at once, from down in the valley, we heard a racket, and this huge, old Russian helicopter came rattling up the hill and parked out in front, and we loaded on that thing. There were seats along the side, either side, and the luggage was piled in the middle. I don't remember if it was tied down or not. I do seem to remember that there was not enough seat belts for everybody, and somebody maybe, they just put a strap around their waist and ran it through some way to hold on. But that old bird rattled a lot and got airborne and took us down the hill from Johnson to Polkara. Well, Polkara was a little more difficult to get out of. We were going to fly from Polkara back to Kathmandu. I forgot now the name of the airline, but Everest Airlines, I think they called it. And flying little airplanes that carried maybe 15, 20 people. Well, we tried for 2 days, I guess. Anyway, we would show up at the ticket office every day, and they'd say, "Oh, we don't have room for you. We don't have." And then I guess they got tired of looking at us, so they finally put us on this flight, and it was an interesting flight. We'd been in the mountains, had no radio, no way of knowing what was going on in the world. Well, as soon as this airplane, which this procedure would not be allowed in any airline that I've ever worked for, ever airline cockpit, but they got the captain and the co-pilot got the airplane, worked together to get it airborne. And then soon after airborne, the captain put his seat all the way back, took out a newspaper, held it up wide in front of him. He was not looking out the window. He was reading the newspaper, and he read the newspaper most of the way to Kathmandu. Glenda remembers that somebody famous had died, and then there was a famous professional golf score that she read about. So we got back to Kathmandu, and uneventfully we made our way all the way back to Hawaii. We were worn out and tired, but we were happy that we had that great adventure. I don't know if I can remember them now, but a few unusual things maybe for the hike. The women, all women, had to wear dresses down to their ankles. They had some real cheap dresses, skirts that Glenda bought, and that's the way they trekked, and it's the way the women lived up in the mountains there. I remember that one of the trekkers, put on, to get up and over the hill because it was so cold, she put on pants, and the Sherpas, oh, they had great fun with that. They thought she looked so funny. She said, "You look like a man. You look like a man." They kept saying, following her around, kidding her. We had a good relationship with them. Along the trail, there were donkeys that they loaded up and would carry a lot of the load way back into the mountains. And we were warned early on, when you meet a donkey train, and there were several of them that would be coming down the line, maybe 5 or 6 or 7, and they all had big bulky loads a lot of times, and they advised us to get on the inside of the trail, because those donkeys, they just kind of go along in a trance, and they just go straight ahead. And if you're in the way, they'll bump you right out of the way. And they were little, but they were really strong. And so if you were on the side of the hill, and some of the trails there was no guardrail, and if you went off, you would die. There's no doubt about it. It's very, very high and very, very steep. So we were told to stay on the inside. There was beer for sale, and all the beer was in each one of the little villages, it was for sale from the Philippines. There was some sort of, I can't think of the name now, but a Philippine beer, and there was no refrigeration. So what they would do would take a pot, a clay pot, and fill it with water, and put that beer in there, and the water evaporating through that clay pot and out would cool the beer, not cold. It would just cool it a bit. Let's see. Can I think of anything else unusual? At the moment, I cannot. But we made our way back to Honolulu. We're proud of what we did. It was a great trip. It's been 26 years, 27 years ago. It seems like yesterday. But I talked to somebody recently that did the same trek. No, he didn't do the same trek. He did a trek in Nepal. And we had a conversation with him, and I read his little story. He had written it. Things have changed, as you might believe. Rather than sleeping on the ground, there are guest houses all along, and they serve breakfast. And I saw pictures, and it looked like being in the mountains here in the resort area. So it had changed completely. The one other thing I remember was that, as I mentioned before, the sanitary conditions eventually, I think, pretty much affected everybody, and it was a lot of at times people diving for a little privacy to get behind the bushes to take care of themselves, and because of that, I think we had a view of just about everybody's naked butt along in the whole crowd of visitors. We thought maybe guessed that there was as many as 50 or 60 people associated with our little trip, and we guessed also that during the normal day they were stretched out over maybe 2 or 3 miles of the trail. We'd be all stretched out, but we'd get together at night again and go from there. One other little story crossed my mind. I can't think of what it was. Anyway, that's my story for today. It's a long story and probably pretty boring, but it's what happened. It's a true story, and I appreciate you watching it. Thank you very much.